Consent calendar, motion by Representative Rita, seconded by Chairman Barrickman. All in favor say aye, opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. We don't listen to you anyway. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the consent calendar is adopted. Item 3, financial statements for fiscal year 14, June, July, and August of 2014, and fiscal year 15 of August of 2014. Do I have a motion to accept them? I have a motion from Chairman Barrickman. The financial statements as presented. Oberweis, all opposed, say no. You seconded it, and we thank you very much for that. And the motion carries. In the opinion of the chair, financial statements are accepted. We will skip over the minutes from the previous meetings as there is an amendment that has to go to members. The other item, and we'll do those tomorrow. The other items are just to acknowledge that we received from the Office of the Auditor General peer review report. Item C is the Auditor General's quarterly report for the fourth quarter of fiscal year 14, ending June 30th, 2014, and that we have received correspondence from the Treasurer's Office regarding abandoned property. And so we acknowledge that we have received those. I do not believe I need a motion on that, Jane? No. Okay. All right. And also in August, congratulations to Bill Holland was elected unanimously the president of the National Association of State Auditors, Treasurers, and Comptrollers. Well done. He does a great job for us here in Illinois. He is not allowed to give a speech. That's why we love him. Bye. All right, and for the record, the court reporter can go ahead and begin. We're going to go back for our final round of questioning. Representative Riboletti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure the court reporter appreciates the breaks. Every so often I watched her over there very diligently for the last 12 hours, so thank you for your hard work. Mr. Weems, thank you for being here. Again, as I've told other witnesses, that I share the same passion you do for stemming the violence, having served as a assistant state's attorney in Will County, watching violence in Joliet, and Lockport, and Bolingbrook, definitely communities that would have some of those needs that you talked about. So I can appreciate that from a different perspective, but in that same universe. So in 2010, you said that obviously there was a spike in violence. And a couple of my colleagues then asked for the National Guard to come out. That's how bad it was. That was in April of 2010. And I know that the governor had said that that would not be an appropriate avenue to do that. I know other members had talked about bringing the Illinois State Police in to help out. And so obviously there was a desire to bring some relief in many different capacities. So when was it, do you think, that the tipping point had been reached, that something had to happen right away? Is there a certain date or time frame in which you said, you know, enough is enough, we've got to get some programming, something out into the community to stem the tide?
Honestly, for me, and again, I want to answer your question as realistically as possible. I mean, that's been going on forever for me. That year wasn't particularly the year for me, but I do think that what was happening was that the community was coming in to the governor's office, coming aldermen, talking to ministers, and everybody. Again, the media was following it very closely. You know, the minute you started talking, it must have been bad to have people talking about having the National Guard. So again, I can't speak for the governor. You know, I can only speak for myself, and really for myself, it was about time. not one thing happened. This has always been there. Again, for many of us, this is not something that happened all of a sudden in the new millennium. This has been going on for a long time. So I can't pick one event that was the tipping point myself.
Sure, and I agree with you, because the year before was bad, the year after was bad.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not as if somehow we had 100 murders one year and then we went to 400. We've been at 300 plus, and we eclipse New York and LA, who have 3 times our population, and it's an unfortunate.
And they're concentrated in certain areas. So while it looks like the state is going down, but in those communities, the numbers could actually be up, right, in particular communities. So it's very hard to pick up one point.
And so some of my concerns about some of this programming and the expenditures are such that if you take $50 million and you say that we have a short time to inject it into those communities, you have been doing this for a long time. Wouldn't you, in your professional opinion, wouldn't you have a short-term goal and a long-term goal as to how much short-term money and short-term programming, long-term goals, long-term planning, long-term dollars? Was that achieved in NRI?
So again, so you're asking me, should we have had a long-term goal versus let's hurry up and get started, but also have a kind of a, again, for me, as a budget person and as an advocate, I would have said that, I would want it to continue, definitely. Usually, in my experience, again, and never having started a program this big before, never been involved in, this big before, the idea would be to get something like this started and then hopefully have there be more investment in coming years. Again, just from where I sat in the budget office, you look at these budget lines, and there are thousands of them, and you kind of figure out what we all care about when you look at these lines. And so what happens is things tend to, and what had happened even with Barbara, this agency started, it was a fairly new agency, and there started being more investment in whether it was domestic violence or other things. And so for me, it was just the investment saying that this is what we care about and this is what we want to do. So I assumed, I think, and again, I'm just speculating on what my thought process was at that time, but I would have assumed that it was going to continue.
Right, but I think that in the programs you may have seen personally and professionally previous, it takes time to get a program implemented with people that are prepared and professionally able to implement it and get results, right? It's not something we can just go out and find people that have a big heart and said, I can do this. It takes time, right?
Yes.
So in your opinion, and in your professional opinion, both in the violence arena as well as in your accounting background, how long would a program of the magnitude of $50 million take to implement?
It could all depend, right? Some programs are kind of what you would consider kind of pay as you go, right? There's something is needed, something is done, and then you pay. There are other programs that are, depending on how widespread it is, have a lot of moving parts. Again, I didn't build the programs, I funded them, right? And so I would think we've done FAST programs before, maybe not at that same dollar amount, but it could have been a lower dollar amount, but with a lot more moving parts, right? There's other programs that exist where there's a lot more activity than what you would have seen, more checks being written than what you would have seen for NRI, but they just might have a very small dollar amount attached to them. So again, because I don't create the programs, I didn't know how many transactions were necessary in NRI versus, let's just say, the program where we pay for people that can't pay for their own funerals when people die. I mean, so we do a lot of that that has a lot of moving parts. So I really wasn't in a position to say, well, yes, it was fast, but I also viewed it as an emergency versus viewing it as just rolling out a normal program.
And are there any other programs that compare to NRI previously or after that you're aware of that checks had to be cut fast? There was an emergency.
Yeah, summer jobs programs. Summer jobs programs are always programs that you have to coordinate with a comptroller, you have to worry about fiscal years, you have to, I think that's every year. You have those issues because it's right at the break of the fiscal year. So coordination, and you have to be fairly quick.
Obviously, finding work for the youth of the community is important. I don't know if that's an emergency. I know you see what I'm saying, where there's an emergent situation.
Oh, remember there's an emergency? No, the only emergency I would compare it to, I apologize, I misunderstood you. The only emergencies that I would compare the shooting deaths of children to is, again, when we would respond to emergencies like tornadoes, where families were completely wiped out and they weren't ready for it. They weren't expecting it. And we didn't even have we don't have a program for that. We just deal with it as it happens. And usually in this state, we're not saying, well, wait a minute, how much does it cost to help these families? We say, let's help these families first.
So you made a comment earlier in your dialogue with Representative Crespo regarding gross mismanagement versus mismanagement.
Yes.
And as I look at the Auditor General's analysis, when I look at the fact that I believe it's 40% of the dollars that were reviewed, or 40% of the expenses of the 23 providers reviewed, there were questions. So what would gross mismanagement be? If it would be 45% or 50% were questionable expenses? You see, because part of the outrage from me is that as you talk about the urgency of getting resources in the community, look at how much of these resources were squandered. Look how many more people we could have helped if the program was effectively implemented. And when we see that there's question marks over 10% of the providers, think about extrapolating that out and how many lost opportunities we had. So again, you think it's just mismanagement, or you don't believe it rises to the level of gross mismanagement?
I believe that there are things that could have been done better. I didn't perform the audit. I think that when you do an audit, you take a sample, which is normal. And I think sometimes that depending on the nature of what it is you're auditing, you might, if you want to start making these, kind of statements about something, you might go past the sample, is what I'm saying. So I'm not saying that their opinion is wrong or invalid. I'm just saying that because I know, at least me personally, how I feel about what it takes to kind of do some of this, I think that it's, you have to get your feet on the ground first, and you have to start working. And then I think, like in any other crisis situation, you evaluate much later, and without necessarily placing blame, you are looking at ways to do things better. Because the most important part to me was that, at least, and again, since you're asking me, is that we were responding.
And I agree that responding is important, but the taxpayers demand accountability that the money they're investing is having a result. So when we send resources down to Central Illinois because of a tornado, we expect that over time, short-term and long-term, that there's gains, that roads are cleared, and that water hookups and utilities are put back in place, and that all first responders are operational. People want to see short-term and long-term, and I don't know if I saw that here. So help me with that.
In comparing those, what we saw was we set up what it looked like to me was an infrastructure of these providers to get services out to these communities that, let's just face it, most people are scared to go anyway. So when we talk about comparing first responders, if we're talking about a tornado, I would say that those people are treated, those are taxpayers, but there's taxpayers up here where the tornado didn't hit that have other issues. So while we're talking about taxpayers as if the communities being affected aren't taxpayers as well. And quite honestly, if we looked at where we're putting our dollars as a state, there are going to be people in those communities that are going to say, this $54 million, this is nothing. compared to for them. So when we talk about
Sir, when I talk about taxpayers, I'm not
Okay.
leaving any person out, and I'm not singling out a state rep district or an aldermanic district. I'm just talking about taxpayers overall. So
I'm just saying that taxpayers have different interests in different communities, is what I'm saying. And so I don't think that the people in those in the communities that were being served view this program as a failure. I don't believe that. Now again, it would take more time for us to even know that, right? But to your question, yes, I think there should be things that you should try to measure. But in this particular situation, again, and I was equating it earlier to how many terrorist attacks did we prevent? How many did not happen? It's very hard to do that. But what we do know is that if a child is not in a high-risk situation, they have less chance of being hurt. That's what we do know. Yes, we should account for all state dollars and all tax dollars. I believe that. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And that's why I say I do believe things could have been done better. But be clear, when you ask me these questions, I personally think we are late to the game, and everyone trying to act like we still care about these communities. But again, when I looked at the budget, and I've looked at the budget going back 30 years, which I was not involved at all, but an issue like this has not been receiving the kind of funding until Governor Quinn did that, had not been receiving the kind of funding that could make a serious impact. I would say the same thing about domestic violence. It's important right now. It's on the news, and because the NFL has all these problems. But let's be clear, we could put more money into that too, and we wouldn't know how many women or children we prevented from being.
Sure, and I have
right.
no doubt, because having worked in a domestic violence courtroom where I was the only prosecutor, and I had one victim witness advocate to take care of a multitude of victims, I hear you loud
Right.
and clear. And I understand it's hard to quantify the
That's all I'm
value
saying.
of when we outreach to a 14-year-old or a 16-year-old who now finds his way, who's at a crossroads, and that we intervene, and we don't know for a fact that intervention was the one that set him straight, or that the individual went and took the wrong turn. I understand that. But there are some metrics that we can all agree upon should be followed. Like if we give a grant, that the money should be used for appropriate expenditures, not ending up in people's pockets, not ending up in the community. And so to me, that's where some of the frustration comes from. And I understand that in the world of the social sciences that we can't, that there's some type of formula that we can plug in and say, if we spend $50 million, that we know that 80 children will be saved, and therefore there's a dollar value, because we cannot attach a dollar value to somebody's life. And I hear you. So, and I agree with you, we're late to the game. This is not some new problem. But time and time again, because of a rush job, I think that because there was so much money leaving, that there wasn't anybody being able to monitor all of it. So to that, in your understanding of the NRI, who was accountable for the oversight of the program?
Again, for oversight of the program was housed at IVPA. So they actually manage the program, and that's again how programs are when they're in particular agencies.
Sure, and you referenced youth work programs, summer jobs programs, and the influx of money. Obviously, it's the difficulty of arranging all those the programs and the people and the dollars. How many, in your experience, did you believe that the Illinois Violence Prevention Group had enough employees in the office to monitor and to distribute those funds so they could keep a watchful eye on them?
I think everyone in state government, all of the employees in state government are doing a hell of a job without there being enough of them. So I would say in general in state government they could use more staff, and it's just kind of hard to do that. I think I heard Barbara's testimony and that she wished she had more, had said something about having more people, and that is unfortunate. I could just, my general opinion is almost in every aspect of state government, they need more help. And so I would say that would be, IVPA would not be any different.
Thank you very much.
Final question from Representative Rita.
You know, we've been here over 12 hours. We'll continue tomorrow. A lot of it's been said. What I was going to talk about was in the neighborhoods and how close they are and what the neighborhoods mean. We keep hearing about the south suburbs and how close they are to some of these neighborhoods here. And then you touched upon that lump sum budget versus in the authority and the BIM. When we crafted that lump sum budget,
Right.
which put it in the hands of the agencies and the governor's office to go spend that, and if that is true, then it really isn't an audit finding, I guess is what but we'll talk with the staff on that. So thanks for coming today.
Thank you, Representative.
And with that, seeing no further questions, thank you for joining with us.
Thank you all for your questions and your time.
Folks,
Sincerely.
we'll be back here tomorrow at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. sharp. And for the members, if you want to leave anything here, we're going to be locking the room up. So that is your choice. If you don't want to haul them back out, they'll be here for you tomorrow. Representative Rice now moves that the Legislative Audit Commission stand adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.